Alaikum salam. Alaikum salam. It's okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa usalli wa usallam ala sayyidil awwaleen wal akhirin nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. All praise are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be constantly showered upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, the master of the first and the last, and his family, his companions, and all those who call to his way and establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. As to what follows, my beloved brothers and sisters, to our friends, our viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, this is a continuation of the New Muslim Corner. And the intention of this is to give some solid information concerning Islam, to separate Islam from culture. And then at the same time, part of the session will be one for questions and answers. And so we will be having general questions and answers, during our presentation that's live, and then there will be 20 minutes, half an hour or so extra for those who are actually here, where we have intimate discussion, concerning, Islam from different angles. And the concept of the new Muslim here is not just somebody who has recently embraced Islam. It also means somebody who is reviving Islam. So a person may have lived in a Muslim family for 25 years, but they were only following the culture of their family. They only did things because their father said to do it, or their mother said to do it, and not because they themselves made an intentional choice to do it. And then, by the will of Allah, at 25 years old, this person, something happens in their life. And then they realize how valuable Islam really is. And so they embrace it. And the zeal of a person who has revived their Islam is very similar to the energy and the enthusiasm of a person who has embraced Islam. But the difference is that the person who is embracing Islam is coming from totally different tradition. And so there has to be orientated toward what Islam is, some of the names, some of the images, some of the cultural parts. But the person who has come from the Muslim world or a Muslim family, they need a type of orientation as well. Because in many cases, they have to understand what Islam is not. Because they were taught a cultural form of Islam, which for the most part, if you go to the majority of the Muslim countries, 75-80% of their culture is Islamic. But there is a section of their culture that may have come from a previous religion before they embraced Islam as a people, which could have been 1,000 years ago, or it could be from influences that are coming in from the mass media or during the colonial period, whatever it may be. And so therefore, we're trying to weed out that which is un-Islamic to give a general picture of the basis of Islam, and then to try to navigate with the new Muslims to find a way where we can practice Islam in the modern world. And this is not an easy job, but at least we are fortunate that we have the Quran in its original form, and we have the teachings of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also in an authentic form. So we can return to this, and we can rejuvenate ourselves. The problem that happened with some of the other major revealed religions is that they did not have their original texts. It's all of the other religions. They did not have their original text. So therefore, when somebody came along and said, this is Christianity, for instance. Because maybe Christianity has gone through maybe the greatest amount of changes. And they come with a new church. Like you will see now the new Zion Apostolic Church, hundreds of names that are in the name of Christianity. And so because there is no source to go back to, then that person who's teaching this new religion or this new version of Christianity can be very valid if he or she is a good preacher, if they teach well, then the people will believe them. So that's the difference in Islam. It's not that we don't have people who will take you astray within the Muslim world, but we have a source that we can go back to know. It's like a fact check. It's like to be able to know whether what is coming to us is authentic or whether it is not authentic. And it always surprises me when Easter comes along and I speak to my Christian friends or just the average person and you ask, this is one of the greatest, if not the greatest Christian holiday of the year. And Easter, when you say the word Easter, what comes in your mind? And for the majority of the people, what comes in your mind, sister? Eggs. Rabbits. Okay, fertility symbols that have nothing to do with Jesus, peace be upon him. And we found out that this is part of an ancient pagan religion who they believe that Austria or Easter, she was a pagan goddess, and they believe after the cold winter, she waved her wand and everything turned green. So somehow it was put together, it was brought together when there was great difficulty on the Christian missionaries. And they used the old concept of when in Rome, do like the Romans do. Or some people say if you can't beat them, join them. So they joined it together. So now, in the ancient tradition, Easter was the resurrection of the natural world in the north from the winter that killed so many forms of life, but now they are resurrecting. So the plants are coming back to life after death. And it happens on the spring solstice time, which is the medium point in the spring. Okay, that's when nature really starts to shine and to come out. And so they mixed it together and they said, okay, we will put the celebration of the death of Christ and resurrection on the same date. So you get 2 for 1. So the people who believed in the resurrection of nature, they're happy because they have their eggs and their rabbits. And the people who believe in the resurrection of Christ, then they're happy because the whole discussion of the crucifixion and the death and the resurrection is remembered. So that's the mixture. And a person who believes this, they can look at a Jew, the Christian can look at a Jew and say, I am Christian and you are Jewish. But all of the followers of Jesus, peace be upon him, were Jewish. Every single one of them. There was no Gentiles. But yet it has changed so much that it's literally a different religion. And the problem is, if they had the sources, they could go back to the original teachings of Isa alayhi salam. But the best that they could do in the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD in Constantinople, under the Roman Emperor Constantine, was to gather the bishops, to gather all of the scriptures and the writings from Rome and Antioch and anywhere they could find them. And they selected 4, in particular Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They selected this and they made what they call a New Testament. So they put together the Old Testament, or what was left of it, which includes the Psalms of David, which we consider a different book, Zabur, and the Torah of Moses, Musa alayhi salam, different book. They put it together, and writings of different scholars and historians and individuals. They put it all together. That's Old Testament, and then the new books they call New Testament. And they call the whole thing Bible, which means a bibliothèque or a library of religious books. So it's all together. But the difference is with Muslims, we also have different religious expressions and cultural practices came into the Muslim world. Because Islam spread rapidly. Within 100 years, Islam spread from the Arabian Peninsula. And this is without mass transportation, communications, anything like this. Riding on horses and camels on foot. It spread all the way to China, far north in Russia, deep south on the Swahili coast of Africa, and all the way to the Atlantic Ocean in North Africa in 100 years. Just imagine the distance. So the people who were coming into Islam, naturally they had a concept of God. They had a religious practice. So they brought it into Islam. And those areas within the Muslim world where the ulama, where the scholars were strong, and where learning was widespread, the people could then sift through the mistakes that they had in their previous religion. And like our great scholar, Sidi Abdurrahman said, they could correct and authenticate their faith. But in the places where they did not have the scholars, then you find great influences from Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, all types of religions in the Muslim world. And it was translated into Arabic too, or into Persian, or into Turkish, or other Muslim languages. And so therefore, this is the reason why it's important to understand the foundations and to know what to stay away from. So that's crucial for the new Muslims. Hopefully, inshallah, you won't run into many of these things. But just about everybody has been overwhelmed, with so many cultural practices. And so we understood in our foundations that the most important aspect of Islam is Tawheed. And that is the oneness of God, monotheism. If a Muslim could be described as anything, one quality that's supposed to stand out about Muslim more than anything else, that is serious, strict belief in one God. That's what's supposed to stand out. In many cases, it's more of a cultural thing. It's the clothing, it may be the language, the food, different cultural things, the masjid, the way it looks. But Tawheed is the most important aspect of the faith. And that is Tawheed in its complete sense, in the sense that we accept Allah as the Lord, sustainer, we call Rabb. Also that we unify and believe that Allah is unique in His names and descriptions. Laysa kamithlihi shay. There's nothing similar to Allah. And also that Allah alone is divine, divinity. Like where you don't make mistakes, where you don't die. It's only Allah has this quality, and only Allah deserves worship. That's Tawheed al-Ibadah. So that means that, that's, you worship the one God. And it is that last form, when Tawheed was being taught to people, many people could say, okay, yeah, there's a great spirit, there's a great God, okay. He's unique, that's no problem. But then when they said, we're only going to worship Allah, we're not worshiping the idols, we're not worshiping the sun, We're not worshiping your leader. When that was said by the prophets, this is where confrontation happened. And this is what we're looking at mostly, Tawheed al-Ibadah, because that is really the important part that our scholars said to correct and authenticate faith. Later on, inshallah, as we grow in Islam, you can go into the philosophical discussions surrounding the names and descriptions, and it's deep philosophy, and it really doesn't affect us, in the life that we're leading. But Tawheed al-Ibadah, unifying our worship only for Allah, this affects us every single day. So we also found out that the opposite of Tawheed is Shirkh, and that is Polytheism. That is association of partners with Allah, that only Allah deserves the worship. And when you have Sharik, which means you have a partner with Allah, you pray through something to Allah. And we looked at Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. We looked at different forms of idol worship, where you pray, to the idol. And in some of the Hindu groups, if you ask them, is that idol God? Some of them will say no. There is a great spirit, but we pray through the idol to get to God. Also in ancestor worship, which is very prevalent in Africa and in China. It's big in China. And I remember one time I was in Hong Kong, and there's a special celebration in China where this is for the ancestors. And so they go to the graves, and they sweep the graves, and they make prayers to the ancestors, because they believe the ancestors are over on the other side, and they will talk to God for them. And also what they were doing, and it was strange, they were burning money by the grave. So they're lighting like 200 US, 500 British pounds. So I asked, what are they doing? And they say, no, they believe that when you burn that money, that they will get the equivalent in hell on the other side. They'll get the equivalent. So you get 200 US on the other side. Now, whether they have banking, International Monetary Fund, or on the other side, I don't know. But they were burning the money. And they felt that the more the money's worth in this world, that they're going to be better off when they get it on the other side. And they were doing that. And we had a slight problem when we saw even some Muslims were sneaking to the graves, and they were sweeping it. We didn't see anybody burning money. But we realized that this culture was affecting everybody. That is shirk. You're going through your ancestor to go to God, instead of going directly to the Creator. You see? That's the essence of shirk. So we're looking at the major forms of shirk, to try to weed this out and to try to have an understanding. Before we go into the forms, are there any questions that anybody has so far about anything in terms of the Tawheed that we discussed, or the Shirk? If anybody has any questions, because this is what the concept is. We can, ask the questions as we go along. Okay, so now we're into the Shirk. Last period, we looked at one form of Shirk in Ibadah. Ibadah is worship, right? So polytheism in your worship. And we'll just go over it quickly, because it leads right into the next one for those who weren't here. And that is, there is a practice of wearing certain garments or talismans. So these are different charms, amulets. So you wear this necklace with sometimes a pouch or whatever. Or reading un-Islamic chants to seek protection or to gain benefit. These are all forms of shirk. Okay? And the Prophet ﷺ, he used to go around, because the Arabs had the practice of, they would tie amulets with written things on it and different things around their neck, sometimes on their ankles or on their arm. They would tie it on their camels, on their horses, and he would go around and he would rip it off, take it off. Okay? And, he would tell them very serious. And in one tradition he said, Man alaqa tamima wukila ilay. O kama qala salatu wasalam. He said that whoever hangs this amulet, then that will become your protector. Allah is not protecting you anymore. It's only that. Okay, that's your wali. And another tradition, we have the translation here, it says, verily, spells, we put spells on people, talismans, right? And these different forms of this talismans can take, like we have rabbit's foot here in the north, we have four-leaf clover, right? You can think of different good luck charms, right? And the charms and talismans and these things, there's different cultures. The Prophet said they're all forms of shirk. Now, what is important about that? We learned in the previous class that Allah said He will not forgive shirk in the next life. In this life, all sins can be forgiven. But after death, the only sin which is unforgivable, it's shirk. Unforgivable sin. So this is something really serious. Really serious. And it's something that a new Muslim should be aware of, because you don't want to fall into something which is like a major problem in your faith. We need to know these things. So the description is that talismans and amulets are objects or a pouch with writing, which is appended on the body or placed in a special area, right? It's made to ward off evil, jealousy, like the evil eye, right? To protect you from the evil eye. Also, wearing verses of the Quran only for decoration. Now, some people, the question that comes naturally is, what if somebody gives me a nice necklace and it says Allah, right? Or some nice Arabic on it. Ayatul Kursi, the special verse of the throne. It's a powerful verse in the Quran. What if somebody gives me that? Now, the scholars are saying, if you wore that only for beauty, decoration, just like a jewelry, then there's nothing wrong with it. But the only problem is, when you go into the washroom, you cannot go into the washroom with the name of Allah. So every time that person goes in the washroom, they have to take it off. See, so this is the problem with that. But if the person believes that what they're hanging now has some power over the things, then that is shirk. And it's supposed to protect you from evil spirits, from demons, from all types of things. And some people really believe in these amulets. And some years ago, I was in the Jami Mosque here in Toronto, when it was the largest masjid in the city. And I, did a talk, on this thing. And I said, how many people have amulets? Can you bring? And some of them, we had a pile of amulets. People realized it was wrong, and they took it off. And some confessed that they've been wearing it all their life and really believed in it. So this is something which is rampant in the Muslim world. Now here in the West, where a lot of cultural practices have changed, you might not find it as much within the Western countries. In the UK, Muslims tend to have more practices from the old countries. But here, across the Atlantic, our biggest problem is now the West, modernization and the things that's coming here, right? But still, the cultural practices remain. From those brothers and sisters who are here, have any of you ever ran into this before in your families? Have you heard about it? Like, what is that you saw?
My mom always had an amulet and tried to give me one.
So she had her amulet, right?
Yeah.
Did they ever say what's inside of the amulet? I guess they don't really know. Because generally it's some special person who's going to make it for them. And then he gets, he does that and he pays it thing. Back?
I was just thinking, amulets are not Islam specific, though, right? I've seen them in other religions as well.
What's that?
The amulets
Uh-huh.
are not Islam specific, though.
No, amulets are, it's in Western society too.
Correct.
Yeah, no, it's not specific to Islam. Actually, it's coming from outside of Islam into Islam. And whether it was the pagan Arabs before Islam came to them, or whether it was in other forms of religion, that they ran into there, but they had to Islamize it. So the people who wanted to make it Islamic, so they said, okay, we will make like a pouch, a leather pouch, and we'll put inside of it writing. So this is sort of like what it looks like. This is an example of one of the talismans. Okay, when I was in the giant, we got these talismans, and we opened them up. And some people were a little nervous, right? Because they didn't know what was inside of it. But it was generally a piece of paper, and it had this they call naqsh. It's like a crossword puzzle. And inside of it is numbers and letters, and sometimes it's got writing around it. And in one case, there was an amulet, and it had Persian writing around it, Farsi. And one of our brothers, Brother Siddiqui, rahimahullah, he was a scholar in Persian. And so he read it, and it said, O Abdul Qadir Jailani. It's speaking to a scholar, Abdul Qadir, who is a scholar, by the way. But they started worshiping him after he died. So they said, O Abdul Qadir, we are swimming in our sins. Save us. It was praying to Abdul Qadir. And they were wearing it around their neck. And they did not know what it said. Okay? So this is now an example. This particular talisman is called the success talisman. What does it do? And literally you can go online, they got a website. So you can go online and find the information. And this one said, carry this talisman for success in business and trade. Draw it upon a piece of virgin parchment. It should be mentioned here that there are certain rules when writing or drawing a talisman, and this cannot be stated here for certain reasons. Secret, right? Please refer to the various occult books. See the word occult? Occult means like the Satan worshippers and the ones who are into spirituality and all that, right? Literally saying occult. So refer to the occult books on talisman making, or study from a school of traditional Islamic magic. Look what they're entering here. So you got to go to a school for Islamic magic. And everybody has magic too. So some people say, well, that's just like third world thing. It's not just third world thing. You know Harry Potter? You know the story of Harry Potter? Harry Potter went to school, a special school, to be trained as a magician. And he's a, proper British young man. And he went to the school, proper British school, and they learned how to cast spells and to do things, and it was part of their culture. So it's every culture in the world has a form of this. Question?
I just wanted to sort of tie it back to something that you were saying earlier about, in Islam we always have the Quran to go back to when we hear certain things about Islam we don't know if they're true. I mean, so this just reminds me, like in the Quran, you hear the story of Musa alayhi salam going to Pharaoh, and there's
Right.
the sorcerers, and so we're very clearly taught that we don't
That's right.
believe in this. So it's like a good example of, when you're presented with these things and you're like, oh, is this part of Islam? Is it not part of Islam? When you go back to the Quran and the sources, you get that clarity. So I think it just relates to what you're saying.
That's right. And when you look at the story of Moses, Musa alayhi salam, that the magicians around the Pharaoh had power. But their power was the power of illusion. And sometimes these magic cults, they actually have some power too. Because they study herbs, they study science, So they have some power. And the magicians, could literally throw their staffs, and it would appear to be snakes. So Musa alayhi salam, on the instructions from Allah, threw his staff, and it became a large snake and ate up all their snakes. And then the magicians submitted to Allah. So that was real. That was magic. And magic is there. And we will look more into that as we go along. Now, there's another talisman. And this one is the attraction talisman. It said, construct this talisman and carry it with you, and you will find people attracted to you and supporting your endeavors. Right? So put a suit on, get your talisman, go to Bay Street. Go for a job. And you'll find people supporting you because you're wearing this thing. You see? Your neck give you the power for this thing to happen. That's shirk. You are literally giving this object power that only belongs to Allah. This one here is one of the deep ones that I picked out, and this one is called the Great Talisman. And the Great Talisman, according to tradition, has been around since the time of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Now, what is important about that, in the second chapter of the Quran, it talks about magic, that when magic was first revealed, it was in Babylon, in Iraq. And Solomon was accused of being a magician because he could talk to the jinn, he could talk to animals, he had special powers. So according to this discussion, this talisman has been around since the time of Sulaiman alayhi salam. It is said that whoever carries it has angels as companions. Look how powerful this thing is. Carry this talisman for protection and luck. It also heals ailments. One should be alone while constructing this talisman. It is traditionally drawn with a mixture of oils consisting of misk, meaning musk, zafaran, ambergris, and rose water upon virgin parchment of deer or goatskin. The construction is to be done on a Thursday night after fasting and prayers. You see, so they have integrated this into Islamic practices. You see, because the Prophet ﷺ used to fast on Mondays and Thursdays, right? So that's like after you fasted on Thursday, which is sunnah. See what they did? So they put the magic inside of this. So this exists. This literally exists in the Muslim world. And that's what it looked like. Inside the pouch, that is the Great Talisman. Okay? And other forms of shirk, one is called ruqya. And ruqya is, when people chant and they read certain things on somebody who's sick or has a problem, and they read this, upon you, and they're calling different jinn and different other spirits and whatnot. This is something which is shirk. It is permissible to, if somebody's sick, to read the Quran, to make dua. There's certain ways, according to the Sunnah, that you can use the Quran to actually help to heal somebody. Because there's healing in the Quran itself. Okay? And the next form, this one is called tiwala. Tiwala. And tiwala is the bewitchment where the person uses something to gain the love, hatred, or emotions of another. And this, I've seen this practice even outside of Islam. The tiwala is, for instance, there's a woman, could be a man too, but in the case of a woman, she wanted this man to fall in love with him. So she went to the person and they said, take this powder, put it in his kufi, put it in his cap. Okay, get that into his cap. If you get that on his head, okay, he will fall hopelessly in love. That's tiwala. Okay? And they sometimes use these things to like make hatred too. Make your children hate you. These are terrible concepts, right? Really evil things. Okay, but unfortunately, it has come into the Muslim world, and there are people who do these things. So we have to be aware of these forms of shirk. Okay, so this is two other forms of it. It is tiwala, and that is also considered to be, forms of polytheism. Other than that, any questions on the ruqya and things?
Yeah, where you spoke a little bit about this, but like, where does the power come from? Like, it seems like you mentioned occult, right? So like, there's this kind of like demonic
Right.
lens. Like, are they working with jinns, for example?
Yeah.
Like what is the form of energy, whatever, it's giving them?
Okay, so the question is, in terms of the form of energy, where's the power come? We're going to go into that now. Because as that first person said, if you want to know more about the talisman, go to Islamic school of magic, right? They mentioned magic, right? So we have to understand what magic actually is. Okay? Any other questions before we go on to the thing? Okay, anything online that anybody has?
Yeah, one question.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum, Shirkh. How do we know or distinguish between magic and a sign from Allah? Like the Pharaoh peoples turned sticks to snakes, and Moses almost the same, but this is a sign from Allah.
Well, we're going to go into magic now, so we can understand, really what it is, from the source. But basically, when the person is calling on power sources other than Allah, natural things in the natural world, then this is where the shirk is. Person is making dua to Allah to cure, asking Allah to cure this person, asking Allah to give them victory. That's okay, because you're asking from the Creator. Allah has angels. Allah has power over all things. Right? There are miracles that can happen. But this is what you need to understand, and that is a siha. And siha is magic. Okay? The general definition, this is a deep study, but a general definition means all types of sorcery, witchcraft, divination, necromancy, which means communicating with the dead. All the different types of sorcery and witchcraft, all of these things that fall under the title in Arabic as-siha. So it falls under this title. Okay? And the reality of magic, some people will say that's hocus pocus. That's nothing. It's superstition. If you're a Muslim, don't believe in it. Don't believe in this magic if you're a Muslim. Okay? But it's real. Why do I say it's real? Because in the second chapter of the Quran, verses 101 to 102, Allah tells us that in the ancient city of Babylon, that two angels came to the city called Harut and Marut. Their names are mentioned in the Quran. And they came with magic. And they taught the people magic. But they said to the people, this is a test. You are being tested. So do not disbelieve in Allah. So the people of the occult, in most cases, believe that the origin of magic itself is going back to Babylon, to Tigris-Euphrates region. And usually you'll see in whether it's movies, whether it's whatever it is that you read and see, you'll see them going back there. Sometimes they go back to ancient Egypt as well, but mainly to Mesopotamia. I remember there was a movie some years ago that had come out. This was called The Exorcist. And at that time, it was considered to be one of the most frightening movies that was ever made. And that was before they really had this power they have today, of sound and all this. Today, they can drive you crazy. So I say, don't watch horror movies. I do not watch them, because it'll weaken your heart, right? It's going to weaken your heart. But this thing came out, and the brother said, I'm teaching this, okay, let's go watch the movie. We went to watch the movie, The Exorcist, okay? And The Exorcist movie began in Iraq. Remember Babylon, right? It began in Iraq, and there was an archaeological dig, and somebody went down, and they found this jar or something, and they broke it, and something came out of it. Okay, and that jinni, we would describe it as jinni, it flew to America, of course, where it's going to go. It flew to America, I think Washington, D.C. or somewhere like that, and it inhabited a young girl. So the whole concept of The Exorcist was how to get it out of this girl. And The Exorcist, the only exorcists that are left, this was back in the 90s, were amongst the Catholic Church. Protestants, they phased it out. And when I was in the Jami Mosque, we had all kinds of things coming at us. People who said they were bewitched and all kinds of things happening. And I went to, there was one person, I went to this prison. And there was Muslim inmate, they said this person's bewitched. But they didn't understand Islam. And they said this person is standing in his cell, and he keeps standing there, and he bends down, and then he goes up and down like this. He's crazy. And I said, no, this man is in good shape. He's making salat. Like they didn't know what salat was, right? But there was a case of a sister who was something inside her. Now, I am not an exorcist. Okay, and I went to the minister, and he said, in Protestants, we do not believe in that. We go to science. So we say psychological problem, physiological problem. The Catholics, and he said there's only about 5 exorcists left on the East Coast of America. There's only 5. And the most famous one was in Philadelphia. So this is a person amongst the Catholics. If you say you're bewitched, then they come and they will take this thing out of you. Of course, they probably, they don't have any work today, because if you act crazy and say you're bewitched, they'll probably give you a job in the government now or something, right? You'll actually get a grant. You might get a grant for your association, right? So all that stuff is like gone now. It's considered to be like hocus pocus. Religion's being phased out of this society. There's a war on Christianity. Serious war on Christianity, not just Islam. So the point that I'm saying is, the movie began in Iraq. Okay? And you'll see this over and over again. The Quran is showing us that's where the magic started. And it started to spread. And especially the children of Israel, this is where the Israelites, they were tested with this. They were tested, and some of them followed the magic, and they started to worship a bull when Moses went up into the mountain. Okay? So therefore, they were heavily tested with this. And they have, within Judaism, they have what is called Kabbalah. Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah is the spirituality of Judaism. But the danger is it can go into magic. Similarly with Muslims, we have a thing, it's alchemy, alchemia. Because you can study alchemy and chemistry and these things on a physical sense, or you can study metaphysical. So the metaphysical study is where the magic comes in. Okay? And so that's the first point. The second point is that the last 2 chapters of the Quran were revealed to protect us from magic and from the jinn. So if magic was not a reality, then why would Allah have revealed Surah Al-Falaq, where it is saying, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ, that you're seeking refuge from the Lord of the dawn, مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ, from the evil of what Allah has created. Right? وَمِنْ شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ, and from the evil of women who blow in the knots. There were different forms in Mecca of magic, men and women. But there was a form where the women magicians, some magic they did, they blow in these knots. This is called nafatati fil uqad. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. And we seek refuge in Allah from the evil of the jealous person if they put their envy and jealousy on you. So this, you're supposed to read this chapter if you feel evil around you. And Surah An-Nas, which is the last chapter about the jinn. We are seeking refuge from the evil jinn. So magic for us is a reality. Okay? We're not saying it's total hocus pocus. If you run into it, you got to take it serious. You cannot joke around with this thing. I was living in Jamaica for a while. I had lived for 4 years in Jamaica. And my family was there at that time. We had we had 5 children at that time. And we were living outside of Kingston in this beautiful area. It has tropical rainforest. Jamaica is a beautiful place, man. Tropical rainforest. All types of fruits and everything like that. And the person who owned our place lived down below us. And one night I looked out the window, and he was an African man, dark skinned man, he had bald head and beard. And I looked, and he was like sitting, and he was doing some kind of spells. And I said, "Oh Allah, this is a magician here." And so after a few months, the rents went up, and he wanted to kick us out the house. So he told us, "You have to leave the house." We said, "No, we're staying in the house." And first, he threatened us. He threatened that he's going to get his boys and whatever, because Kingston at that time was rough, but the Muslims were organized. And we had a reputation, so that didn't work. And then, the woman who was working for us, she said that, we opened up the door one day, and we looked in front of the door, and there was eggshells and hair and all kind of stuff like in the front of the door, right? So we went to the maid, and we said, "What is this?" So she said, "I know somebody who's gifted, lives down in the valley." So she brought this woman, and the woman couldn't speak, right? And she looked at it, and she went, and started pointing around. And our maid said, this woman said, "All your children are going to die. Like, if you don't leave this house, all your children are going to die." So this is serious, right? Now, if you believe in magic, right, you will start to cry and shake and everything, because this is real, right? It was there. We swept it up, threw it away, and we cleaned the house. We started fasting. We read Surah Yasin. We played Surah Yasin, chapters of the Quran, and we functioned as Muslims. Nothing happened to us. Everybody was waiting for something to happen. All the people on the road, all around, they're waiting for us. Nothing happened, man. Because it was superstition, right? A lot of the power of magic is based upon the superstition of the people who believe in it. If you don't accept the power of magic, most of the magic power, it doesn't have much power over you. But you need to know what it is, because they can put something in your drink. There's some things they can physically hurt you, right? And there may be cases, extreme cases we'll talk about, where the jinn are involved. But in the definition of magic, magic can be the speed of the hand. And the Prophet ﷺ said that in bayan, he said that in speech there is magic. So some people in their speech, they can trick you. It's a form of trickery. But what we're talking about, this, how it looks, basically, what the Quran is saying, just so you can see the translation. And it says, "And they followed what the devils chanted of sorcery in the reign of Suleiman. And Suleiman, meaning Prophet Suleiman, was not an unbeliever, but the devil's disbelief, meaning the jinn. They taught men sorcery and such things as came down to the two angels at Babel, Harut and Marut. This is the Quran. Yet these two taught no man until they had said, surely we are only a trial, therefore do not disbelieve. Even then people learned from these two magic, by which they might cause a separation between a man and his wife. And they cannot hurt with it anyone except with Allah's permission. And they learned what harmed them and did not profit them. And certainly they knew that the buyers of magic would have no share in the happiness of the hereafter, and evil was the price for which they sold their souls, if they only knew. So the Quran is giving you the history of how magic came down. And one of the worst things that a magician can do, and what the shaitan, wal-iyadhu billah, loves the most, is the separation of husband and wife. That's what they love. Okay? What are some of the types of magic? There's the type of magic like in the Quran, it's nafathati fil uqad, blowing in the knots, casting spells. You see Harry Potter, he had his wand and he threw. You can throw the spells. If you go to these, there's literally schools of magic. In all cultures, you'll have certain Obeah men. In Caribbean, we say Obeah man. So you say the Obeah man in South Africa. I lived in South Africa for a long time. And in South Africa, in Cape Town, they have what's called Sangoma. And these Sangomas are really powerful magicians. I mean, the things that they do to get the magic, I can't even say it in the class. But there was one brother named Yusuf. He was born, they believed that he was a magician from when he was born. Because there's certain signs they see on a person, right? So when Yusuf was young, they brought the Sangomas to him. And when the Sangomas looked at Yusuf, they said, he's too big for us. Take him to the other ones. So they had to go to the top Sangomas. And they said, this boy is gifted. So they brought him into the order and they taught him. And by the will of Allah, he accepted Islam. And so he told us some of the things that happened to him. Now this is real testimony because he was one of them, right? And he said they were doing things down by the water. And he said he saw smoke turn into like human forms and moving on the water. And he saw crazy things, right? So they have some power. They do have some power. But as the Quran said, it cannot harm you unless Allah allows it. Like that one in Jamaica, Allah did not allow. Didn't happen. So you have to believe that if something does touch you from the magicians, it's a test. It may be a purification, but there's a reason for it. Another form of magic is summoning the jinn to perform acts of good and evil. So you actually call the jinn. You summon them. And there's different ways of doing this. In many of the societies, I know in the Caribbean, they will do drums and they'll do certain things. In Jamaica, they had a thing where they're playing the drums and then they set a table with food. And then they roll their bellies. They call rolling the belly. So you do a dance where you're sort of moving around, your belly's moving around. And they said Edward Seaga, the prime minister, he was an Arab guy. He said he could roll his belly, better than anyone on the island, right? And so that you roll your belly, and the thing gets all into a thing, and suddenly you turn around, and all the food on the table is gone. It's gone, right? And then somebody in the group, usually a woman, gets inhabited. and she will start to talk in tongues. They'll say all kinds of languages. This happens in the Christian church too, you know. We call it talking in tongues. And in some cases, she will dance around, and the young men will dance with this, and all the young men get tired. And then she sits down, and then special people come to her and they start asking her questions. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. And she answers, another voice comes out of her. Okay? So in order to do all these things, okay, you got to study. So you go to these people and you got to sacrifice something. In Haiti, you know the island of Haiti, right? They have a voodoo. They have a magic they call voodoo. And this voodoo is really bad stuff. One Haitian had accepted Islam. I met him in Montreal, and he said, make dua for me, because I'm going back to Haiti. And he said, our magicians are so strong, they fly. They're flying around. He said, the magicians in Haiti are insane. He said, make dua for me. It's really bad things that they do. And they have zombies, right? I don't want to scare you for tonight, right? But they have zombies where they inhabit the person and they put this thing on people. But they have things which can be explained scientifically. Like, for instance, when they want to make a zombie out of a person, they will give that person certain poisons, and that person dies or appears to be dead. And they bury the person in the grave. And after everybody leaves, they come to the grave, open it up, and they give you the antidote. And you're laying there, looking up, and he's standing over you. And he's saying, like, you want to live? You have to obey me. Now imagine the trauma that person has gone through. How you're traumatized, right? That's why the zombies are like this. Okay, zombies today are in movies and stuff like that. But these are real zombies. You can go to Haiti. They used to have before zombies. You see them. Okay, they're traumatized people, traumatized by the magicians. But they found out that this poison that they give, it's something from some creature of the sea. It's something that it makes your body go into what appears to be a form of death. But it shuts down your body, but you're still alive. There's other cultures that have this as well. And you know, either after a period of time you'll come back, or there's an antidote, you come back. So the concept of the magic here, you know, that happens is that the people are summoning jinns, creatures from smokeless fire, in order to perform acts of good or evil. Now, in most cases, people do not summon jinn to do good, Muslims, because it's not within our teachings to do this. And the Prophet ﷺ did not allow it. So mainly what they're summoning the jinn to do is evil. So these creatures of smokeless fire that we believe are real, we don't see them for the most part. They're on a parallel world. But in order to go over to the parallel world, you study forms of magic. That's what the magic is. It's to study how to communicate, how to bring this force there. You know, the Muslims even made fairy tales out of it. Kalila wa Dumna. They had 1001 Arabian Nights, and they wrote different things, and then they had the jinni, right? Open sesame. You know, the jinni comes, right? The genie of the lamp. Right? So you rub the lamp and the genie comes and he'll give you 3 wishes. So they made a joke out of it. But actually, there was societies that study how to communicate with these evil forces and then how to use them to do things. That's where they're getting their magic from. If they do, but in 90% of the cases, it's superstition. They psych you out psychologically, right? They psych you out. 90% of the cases. So there's nothing really, but 10%, some of them, they do have magic. And that's the reason why, especially for the new Muslims, when we're making wudu, when we're cleaning ourselves, right? When we're saying Allahu Akbar, when we're reading from the Quran, when we eat halal food, permissible food, when we stop swearing, you are purifying your body. You're purifying your spiritual self. So these evil forces can't touch you. One person described it, they were describing Muslims, they said Muslims like have a dome over them. It's like a spiritual dome. You're literally protected. And these things may be even coming at you. But when you're living an Islamic life, okay, then it just goes away. Because it's just too much. Because you purified yourself. And all the things that we're doing, fasting in Ramadan, purification. The money that you have, giving 2.5% to the poor and the needy, it's called zakat. Zakat means purity. It means purifying your wealth. Hajj is purifying your whole life. So the whole essence of Islam is purity. Tawheed is purifying your beliefs. You see? So the whole of Islam is purifying you in order that you can be in communication with Allah, protected by Allah, and the evil forces cannot harm you. That's the essence of what Islam is. But magic is opposite. So they are using these forces, and sometimes they even use these things to tell fortunes. You know, I was just riding along Morningside. It's by Morningside just when you get to Shepherd, when you come off the 401. And on the left side of the road, it had a big sign, and it was talking about a fortune teller. You can come to her, lady such and such, and she will do this for you. She had a big sign on the road. Because people go to these fortune tellers. Sometimes they have a crystal ball. Sometimes they have tea leaves. Sometimes they throw bones or whatever. They do different things in order to tell fortunes. And in many cases, or in some cases, few of the cases, they actually communicate with the jinn, and they can hear knowledge. And you know, from our sources, the Quran talked about the jinn stealing into the heavens when things are coming down from above 7 heavens, and the jinns now can go there, they can hear certain things, and they can bring it back. But the person who's communicating with the jinn, most of what they hear from the jinn is not true. But some of it can be true. So what the fortune teller is doing, when you come in, they psych you out. Tell me something about yourself. So you start talking about yourself, where you're from. They're reading you, right? So they can judge who you are, and they'll say certain things, and if you nod like that, then they know that you agree. And they use psychology, and they try to psych you out. Because of what? Oh yeah, right. Yeah. So the fortune telling, okay? And the Prophet ﷺ said very clearly, "Man ata arrafan fasa'alahu an shay wa saddaqahu batala salatuhu arba'ina yawman." He said, whoever goes to a fortune teller and asks them something and believes it, their prayer is not valid for 40 days. In another case, he said at the end of the hadith, فَقَدْ كَفَرَ عَلَى مَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ. That person has committed disbelief. If you go to the fortune teller and you believe them, finished. Palm readers. They can look at your palms, you know the lines in your palms? And they can tell, that's the lifeline, that's this now, you're going to be successful. They'll read your palms. And Muslims got into it. They even had a palm reader, the thing, it was in Karachi, they had down by the water in Pakistan. They had palm readers. Okay? Did you ever see that there in Karachi? Yeah, this palm reader is famous, right? And so they make business out of it. And the last form of this, which we're going to go into next week, inshallah, we'll go deeper into this. Because this, it takes more than one period. And that's possession by the jinn. Okay? But basically, for you to understand, number one, okay, because we'll go over this again, magic is considered disbelief. Okay? And shirk. Okay? And it's considered to be a capital punishment, a crime, capital crime. And the punishment in the Islamic court, if the person does not repent, if they continue to do this magic, it could be capital punishment for siha. Okay? And but the key thing about magic, and I'm going to open up the floor for our final questions. The key thing about magic is the greatest power of the magician is in the mind of the people. It's superstition. It's to psych you out. Some of them also have forms of power. And we need to purify ourselves. If you're basically following the Islamic forms of purity, you don't have a problem. This brother called me. We had a hotline at this office that we used to have. And they called me and they said, Brother Abdullah, you got to help us. I said, what is wrong? My wife is seeing this big black object at the bottom of the bed. And it comes periodically. And I said, okay, take it easy, brother. I said, take it easy. And I said, do you make salat? And they said, oh, Canada is really difficult. I work and no, sometimes we do. I said, okay. I said, do you eat halal food? He says, no, there's not many halal shops in Canada, so we just eat anything. Okay? And so I said, what I was saying to them, I said, as I was talking, he said, it's in the room. And his wife was on the phone too. And they started, going on. I said, brother, you have to practice Islam. Your solution is just practice Islam. You see, their problem was they were not praying, they're not eating halal, they're not purifying themselves at all. Right? I said, don't ask, I'm not the Pope. Right? Don't come to me like I'm the Pope of the Vatican. Right? Your cure is in the religion itself. See? But that's our problem. We have so many superstitions and so many fears that are in us, and it governs the way we think. The more you depend upon Allah, the stronger your belief in Allah becomes. The more you depend on Allah, these things fall away. You won't even be bothered by it. But it's the ones that are weak in their faith, and they go around these evil environments, that can get caught in this thing. So before we close, I want to see if there's any general questions anybody has in the final moments of this class. The floor is open. Online. Yeah.
Question, how would you identify a legitimate Islamic person who has the ability to remove bad spirits, jinn from property? All occupants make salah and recite Quran and go to graveyard and make the
Yeah, so the question is, how can you identify a legitimate person, to help you? And, for the details of this, we're going to go somewhat in the class next week. But basically, if somebody claims to be someone who can help you, you have to look at that person, right? If they're really practicing Islam or not. And you got to ask somebody aside from that person about him. Does that person really practice Islam? And if the cures that they're giving you are coming from the Quran, they're coming from the way of the Prophet, then you're okay. But when the person starts giving you a spell and starts, doing these different things, they make business off of you by writing the amulets. And they're trying to get your money. You got to avoid this type of person. So you need to check the practice of the person, because there is an Islamic way of, dealing with these things. Next week, inshallah, we'll go more into the details in terms of, possession by the jinn. Question?
Assalamu alaikum, Shirkh. Can you also explain the Ouija board game?
Okay, the Ouija, is another form of magic, and where they literally, are around this board, and I don't know the details of it, but once you, set it up and whatnot, it starts to move. Pieces of it start to move, and it can tell your fortune. It can do different things like that. It's another form of magic, and they have a thing called seance, where they hold hands, and then they call upon forces with the seance, and they say they hear a voice and whatever, and so this is like the seance. And these things I don't know about now, but I know in the 90s these things were big in the 90s, right? These Ouija boards and this I Ching thing they called, and then the seances, but these are forms of magic, and we do not believe in them. We go directly to the Creator, the remembrance of Allah, the purification of our lifestyle, not getting involved in superstitions. Like I say, don't, if you watch horror movies, you need to stop, because it will weaken your heart. Because the sounds that they have now, the flashes that they put on you, and sometimes it's what they call subliminal, like you can't see it, it's flashing things at you. It'll come out when you're sleeping at night. It'll affect you in your life. So there's no sense in weakening our hearts for entertainment's sake. But some people really get a lot out of this entertainment. But it is a really bad practice. You should try to avoid this as much as you can. Question? Okay? Yeah.
Are there any specific du'as or surahs?
Yes, so next week, inshallah, because we have part of this class to be a general, gathering. Next week we will go into some of the different things that you can actually read. But I can give you something from now. There's a verse in the Quran, Ayatul Kursi. This is the 2nd chapter, verse 255. You need to try to memorize this chapter, this verse, in Arabic. And there's a chapter called Yasin. It's also powerful. The last 2 chapters of the Quran, they're short, right, to memorize those as well. And inshallah next week I will bring you some du'as as well that you can have. But mainly those last 2 chapters of the Quran, believing in Allah, not accepting superstition, then you find that, it's not going to bother you at all. It's the people who fill their minds with this foolishness, then it comes back on them, and it bothers them. Any other general questions, anybody? Yeah.
I think you might go into this in the next lesson, but how powerful is a jinn really?
The jinn are very powerful. They're made from smokeless fire. They can do a lot of different things. They can move around. In the time of Prophet Solomon, Sulaiman alayhi salam, one of the birds that he was in touch with found the kingdom of Sheba, Bilqis, which is like Ethiopia, right? She had a palace in Yemen, and her base was Ethiopia, a place called Axum. And it reported back, the bird reported back to Suleiman that she had this beautiful throne. So Suleiman, said basically, who could bring me this throne? And it was one of the jinn, an Ifrit. And then before he blinked his eye, it was there. So that's powerful, right? That's mean to go to the area of what is now Jerusalem, all the way to Ethiopia, and get it and come back within the blink and twinkling of an eye. That's power. But fortunately, they have no power over us, generally. They can't affect us. They're in another world. But what these evil people try to do is to use them and to get that power and to do evil things, based upon that. But generally, all the different aspects of Islam gives us like a dome of protection that surrounds us. So the more you learn these things, you're literally protecting yourself from evil. The more Islam that you practice, and the higher you get in your Islamic knowledge. Now, any other general questions anybody has?
What
Yeah.
about smudging? The neighbors use smudging, would that be the same as
The smudging, that is with the tobacco, right? Tobacco? Yeah, with the sage and, whatever. There's different forms within the native culture. Some of it is a practice connecting them to the Great Spirit. It depends upon how they look at it. There are some nations that believe in the Great Spirit, but there are other ones that believe in more power forces in nature. So the practice itself is not necessarily wrong because it's not doing anything, but it depends upon the group of people you're dealing with. It's not something that we, as Muslims necessarily do. But there's different nations within the indigenous people. Some believe in the Spirit, Great Spirit, and some believe in other smaller powers. So the ones that believe in the smaller powers, that's Shirkh. But the ones that believe in the Great Spirit, that's the Creator. The Mi'kmaq people in Nova Scotia, they have a strong belief in one God. In America, there's a group called Cherokee, the Cherokee Nation. Cherokee Nation has strong belief in one God. And some of the nations you'll find still very strong, amongst them, the belief in one God. Now, so inshallah, we're going to close the class, for now, and just to have a general talk, and to share with some of the things that have been brought for us. And inshallah, we'll get together again next week. Have a safe journey home. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.